Thank you very much for this very nice and generous introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today in Ljubljana and to give this presentation. So thank you very much for coming. I already had a very good day, a meeting with the minister, then a meeting with experts from the water sector and involved in our ICPDR expert groups. And I was asked to give a broader presentation on the transboundary management in the Danube River Basin, and to actually present the work program from 2022 to 2027. And as you know, just as a general introduction, the ICPDR functions under the Danube River Protection Convention, and we have actually 15 contracting parties, including the European Union. So you can imagine that this is a lot of coordination work with a lot of responsibility and also a lot of challenges at the moment, as the Ukraine is a contracting parties of our, and the of course invasive war in the Ukraine is also hampering our work, but we still hope that the Danube can be a connector for the Danube to stay involved in those difficult times. So I'm going to the first slide, where I want to flag really that there are a lot of pressures in the Danube River Basin. When I speak about pressures, I'm talking about certain pressures that stem from drivers, for example, from water uses like hydropower, navigation, agriculture, and so on, industry. And those pressures have been started to develop in the Danube River Basin approximately in the mid of the 19th century, when population started to grow, and when also a lot of measures were taken that the certain factors like the pollution of the waters of the Danube River Basin started to increase. But it was also the time when a lot of infrastructure measures took place, like the draining of agricultural areas to increase the crops, led to a channelization of rivers in the Danube River Basin, which of course modified them in their natural structure, and out of our view today caused impacts on the environment. But since many years, reconstruction in the other direction has been going on to first of all adapt measures and infrastructure projects that they also meet the environmental objectives. So we don't want to hamper or hinder socioeconomic development, but what we want that environmental objectives are being taken into account and met in the end. So based on this, within the ICPDR, I mentioned that already, we are responsible to coordinate river basin management and water resources management on an international basis. And we have brought a lot of tools into place together with our contracting parties to actually enable a functioning and better management in the Danube Basin. I also highlighted that in the morning in the other meeting, that it is very interesting that the cooperation in the Danube River Basin started with information sharing, which is usually the thing that river basin organizations want to do, but it's usually very difficult and sometimes it doesn't work at all. But due to the cooperation, will and trust, this sharing of information related to water quality and other aspects was the initiation of the ICPDR, and the transnational monitoring network was brought into place. It is really to understand the dynamics regarding quality and possible pollution across the Danube River Basin, and I think right now we have more than 100 sampling stations where information is really openly shared, and this information is also shared in our Danube River Basin Management Plan. We do have the joint Danube survey, which takes place every 6 years, and it's actually the biggest transboundary survey in the world, I would say. It brings scientists and practitioners together to sample the Danube and also several tributaries from Germany down to the Black Sea. It has a scientific high value, looking at innovative methods like eDNA to better understand biology, in addition to the taxonomic assessments for water status that are already in place. So we are very proud of having these joint Danube surveys. There are a lot of guidelines to actually make the water use and management in the Danube Basin more sustainable. There's a guideline on sustainable hydropower use and development, on agriculture, but also the joint statement on navigation that brings together navigation, development and measures while also meeting the environmental objectives of the Water Framework Directive. We have a climate change adaptation strategy in place since 2018, which also helps us at the moment to actually drive and better understand extreme events like floods and droughts, and I will come to this. So what I would like to flag as well, that besides the many challenges that we are sometimes facing, that working for the Danube brings a lot of joy as well in the Danube family, and we have a lot of achievements since the first Danube River Basin Management Plan aligned to the EU Water Framework Directive has been published. And you can see some key figures here, like the reduction of organic emissions, so from municipal wastewater by 60%. This is really quite an achievement, and the situation in the Danube River Basin looked differently many years ago, and this reflects that far more wastewater treatment plants that are also functioning and that are connected to a sewage system are in place. And I will also come to this in a bit with more detailed figures. Also, the nitrogen emissions have been reduced by 30% and phosphorus emissions by 50%. In the beginning, I think it was in the beginning of 2000, there was the phosphorus ban in the entire Danube River Basin, which of course contributed significantly to this. We are also looking at continuity interruption in the Danube River Basin, and to meet the aims of the Water Framework Directive and ensure longitudinal river and habitat continuity. So we can say that 127 fish migration aids have been constructed to ensure that, and in addition 58 bigger river restoration projects have been completed that provide, more quality for the aquatic fauna and flora in the basin. And also almost 62,000 hectares of wetlands have been connected and reconnected to the Danube River and tributaries, which doesn't only have an ecological positive effect, but of course it also creates retention areas to buffer negative effects from flood events. So we do have a vision besides our legal framework. So we have the Danube River Protection Convention that aims for equitable use of water and the sustainable development of the basin. And we have the EU Water Framework Directive and the EU Floods Directive that we implement on the international level. We coordinate the implementation of it. But we also have a vision that's a little bit easier to understand also for the wider public, which is actually to make the Danube River Basin cleaner, healthier and safer. So these are our 3 pillars that we are working on. If we look at the management plans, we just had an update of the Danube River Basin Management Plan aligned to the EU Water Framework Directive published in 2021. And 1 year ago in February, we had a ministerial meeting that actually adopted the plan and renewed the commitments to be achieved within the Danube River Basin. And the same is the case for the Danube Flood Risk Management Plan, which is here to reduce the risks for humans, of course also animals and the environment and health stemming from flood events. We do have, and here we are getting more into the technical aspects. The management plan doesn't address everything, not every management issue that might be there. But the contracting parties agreed to focus on the key water management issues in the basin, and that was towards the management plan 2009, the significant water management issues, and we are talking about organic pollution from municipal wastewaters, point source pollution, nutrient pollution that is mainly diffuse pollution stemming from agriculture, hazardous substances pollution, a very important water management issue in times when emerging substances get more and more every day, because also our analytical skills are getting better and better, which means we analyze more, but we don't always know is it good or bad for the environment. So we have to look at it. Hydromorphological alterations, I mentioned that already. River continuity interruption, hydrological abstractions that can be negative to achieve the good status. And since recently, we do have a 5th water management issue, which is also a very important topic. It's the effects of increasing climate change, addressing drought and water scarcity, but also other extreme events like flood, for example. So these are our management issues, and I want to take you through the 3 pillars, and I get to the cleaner Danube River basin first, which is all about reducing, cutting, and ideally eliminating pollution that stems from all kinds of water sectors, municipal and industrial wastewater. Of course, no wastewater treatment plant is of added value if it's not connected to a sewage system. And we can say that up to now, 80% are connected to wastewater treatment plants. Also, the nutrient removal connectivity in mid to big settlements is very important, and it's now up to 75%. So a lot of measures have been taking place, and I always like those maps because this show very well what actually happened on the left-hand side, and I will try. Yeah, this works. You can see this was the reference for urban wastewater treatment in the first management plan, and it is very clear the blue dots are wastewater treatment plants that are also connected to a sewage system, and you can see that a very good development and situation was available in the upper Danube River Basin, but the further down you went in the basin, the red dots mean no treatment plants or not connected, also the green and the brown dots. So the situation was not very good. But if you look at the assessment of the latest Danube River Basin Management Plan, you can see where the figures that I showed you beforehand come from, because a lot of improvement has been achieved. You can see a lot of blue dots, so treatment plants in place and connected, also in the rest of the Danube river basin. And I mean, billions of euros have been invested to enable this. Of course, there's still room for improvement here, but a lot of plans and work is also ongoing. That's our vision. We already had that in the plan of 2009, that of course we want wastewater treatment plants all over the Danube River Basin. And I think I have mentioned the hazardous substances beforehand, that even, you know, here further measures will be needed to actually have like not only 3, but at some places 4 treatment phases to also eliminate hazardous substances and emerging substances out of our water and prevent that it is being discharged into the Danube River Basin. So a lot of work to do, but a lot of things already happened. We want a healthier Danube River Basin, and this refers to species who actually can't talk, so they need to be protected, they need to be conserved. So it relates to ecosystems, habitats, restoration of habitats, so that species, aquatic species, can still develop. You can see I'm having a problem with this. Here, you can see our flagship species, the Danube sturgeon. There are 6 species in the Danube River Basin. 1 is extinct already, and others among them are actually endangered, and they are highly affected by river continuity interruption. And we of course want to protect our flagship species, which also enables us to explain a little bit better to the public why continuity is important for a river, because the sturgeon migrates from the sea upstream and downstream again. If this is not the case, then the populations are limited, and a lot of work is ongoing to actually protect the sturgeon. The EU is currently supporting a study that is managed by the ICPDR to put a feasibility study and design options together how to make the Iron Gates dam that is managed between Romania and Serbia passable for fish, but also for sturgeon. And this is quite big ongoing, I would say, because it's not only the continuity interruption, but also a transboundary issue coordinating between a EU member state that has to implement the Water Framework Directive and a non-EU member state that actually is only but at least committed to implement the Water Framework Directive, but Serbia doesn't have to implement the Framework Directive at the moment. But so far the work is really going well and very positive. You can see here, and I could show you a lot of maps, but I chose that one. You can actually see the situation on continuity in the Danube River Basin. The dark green spots are those where dams already are equipped with a fish bypass facility and passable for fish, and the dark green ones are those that will be made passable hopefully by 2027, and the red and orange ones are still a problem where either no bypass facilities are possible or for sure not in place yet. But you can also see in comparison, and you actually can't see it because I didn't show this map, but the situation was different in 2009, and 127 fish migration aids that were constructed is actually quite a lot. We want a safer Danube River Basin, which means we want to reduce the risks and the damage. We can't reduce the risks, but we can reduce the damage that stems from floods with various measures, and also being aware of floods. The colleagues of the Environment Agency showed me the very impressive flood warning system today that has been established in Slovenia, but also cross-border with Austria and within the Sava region. And this is exactly how damage from floods could be reduced, to have a good warning system in place in combination with other measures that, of course, need to be taken, including communication. So the flood risk management plan has maps like this included, which actually maps flood hazard areas and possible flood scenarios. And this really helps to understand the flood dynamic in the Danube River Basin, and combined with measures that are taken on the national level. So this is what we are doing on floods, and I'm very happy to say, and I think I mentioned that in the beginning, that last year we had a ministerial meeting, and all ministers of the Danube River Basin responsible for the Danube River Protection Convention reconfirmed that actions have to be taken to further improve the situation, and there are many commitments in a renewed Danube Declaration of 2022 that actually should help us to achieve visions and to do the related assessments to understand what is going on in the Danube River Basin. And the Danube, the ICPDR work program 2022 to 2027 is aligned. The work programs of the expert groups are always shaped for 3 years, so they go until 24, but as the Water Framework Directive has the deadline in 27, I think the key points are covered already in the work programs and will then be extended. So I mentioned the vision, but how will it develop by 27? So of course that's a critical timeline, and we really want to achieve more. So the implementation of measures on the national and international level are very important, and they will be laid down in the Danube River Basin Management Plan and in the Flood Risk Management Plan as well. So there are many commitments to make the Danube River Basin cleaner. And on one hand, it is clear that further actions will be taken, and there's a commitment to actually improve and reduce the pollution, and there will be the existing measures. I mentioned the wastewater treatment plants beforehand that will be maintained, but there will be also further and additional measures being taken, and we are speaking of all sectors again, so industry, urban pollution, and also agriculture, and for surface waters and groundwaters to really reduce the pollution in order to increase the figures of the 60% towards even more. And of course, this will be critical by 2027, but I'm sure we won't be at the level of having fully achieved our vision, but of course we will keep going. Then the commitment for healthier. I mentioned the challenges in the Danube River Basin regarding that point beforehand. So also there is a strong commitment to actually take further measures. It will be about better understanding areas of over-abstraction, I mean, in relation to surface water, but over-abstraction is also of importance for groundwater, and actually take counteracting measures. I said a lot about fish and sturgeon migration. So it is planned, and you saw that in the map, to actually connect further river reaches with fish bypass channels. And I would like to flag here, if the Iron Gate dam will be made passable for fish, then automatically 1,800 kilometers of the Danube mainstream will be connected. And then if the dam in Slovakia, Gabčíkovo, will get will be also passable for fish migration, it's even more kilometers. So it will be really a flagship activity. In addition, it will be important to further connect wetlands to the Danube River, but also its tributaries. And this will also highly contribute to an activity that is rather new to the ICPDR, dealing with biodiversity. So in addition of the Water Framework Directive, there are certain species, among them the sturgeon, who need more attention than those species that are not endangered. And I was recently asked by a journalist if biodiversity is heavily threatened at the moment, and I can't say that. I think we don't have to be too much concerned about biodiversity in the Danube River Basin at the moment, but we definitely have to keep an eye on it, so it doesn't happen in the future with all the changes we are facing, infrastructure development, but also the effects of climate change. So we definitely need to have a clear look at it. What will be also done here is to look at sediment transport and a proper sediment balance, which of course is very important to keep the rivers of the Danube River Basin intact when it comes to morphology. The flood risk management, I mentioned that already. We want the basin to be safer. There is activity, and I think you know this from your national work as well when it comes to floods. Awareness raising is very important, and I learned today that a lot of activities are also going on the public level to make people more aware that floods are happening, and to actually make the public more aware and be able to react to it. And of course, it's important to avoid new flood risks. This can be done by maps that I showed you beforehand, by awareness raising, and of course also by merging or matching the objectives on the basin-wide levels with the flood measures that are being done on the national level. So this needs to go together to reduce risks, to strengthen resilience, and all of this is based on a strong solidarity principle across the basin. In that context, we discussed it today. It's also very important for us to match the work between our expert groups, because measures that are taken for flood protection might have a negative impact on the good ecological status. So therefore, the flood protection group is working together with the hydromorphology task group to get coordinated and actually prevent that we ourselves cause those adverse measures. And so you can see communication is always an issue, no matter if you want to communicate with the public or even between experts and our expert groups. So we definitely try to improve this. Climate change in the Danube River Basin, and in particular drought and low water flow. This is really something that I like to say, that unfortunately drought has arrived in the Danube River Basin. It was an issue also in Slovenia and also in countries like Czech Republic and Romania before, but other countries like Germany and Austria have never been affected too much by droughts, but the last summer with the heat waves and the low precipitation, also those countries have been affected, and therefore we discussed this topic in the frame of our ordinary meeting in December, and it was clearly decided that drought should now be addressed with action. And the first step will be that we organize a workshop between the Danube countries to discuss this topic and actually understand the needs of the Danube countries. And we had a great exchange today with the Drought Management Center in Slovenia, of which I hope that will get involved in the process, because there's a lot of knowledge already available, also in countries like the Czech Republic. And I'm a big fan of not starting everything from scratch, but first understand what is already available and what can we make out of it and what do we have to do on top of it. But it will be a challenge to cope with climate change effects and actually understand what is actually the impact from other human sources, anthropogenic pressures, and what's the portion of climate change at the moment. And I think this is proven by analysis that increasing the temperatures are increasing and precipitation is decreasing over a period of 30 years in Europe, and this also affects the Danube River Basin. And you can see a map that was done by the Joint Research Center in a report for August 22, and this is the Danube River Basin, and it was extremely dry in Germany, but also in Croatia, Slovenia, Romania, at the southern edge of Ukraine, and it's definitely a topic that needs to be addressed to see how can we cope with this if water in our rivers is decreasing and there are still demands for the water uses like hydropower, agriculture, and also navigation. So it's really the moment to get the water users into a dialogue also on the basin-wide scale. And I will be looking forward to also work with Slovenia on this and have you on board. So before I get to the final slides, I really want to say that water connects. I mean, the Danube, on the one hand, has always been a connecting river, bringing countries together with a lot of cooperation, will, and trust. But it also connects different sectors, and also under the light of climate changes, but in general of certain pressures that can stem from water uses, it is really important to have stakeholder involvement, to have a dialogue with inland navigation, with the agricultural sector, which is not always easy, but of course also with the hydropower sector. And it is planned to have a hydropower workshop on some burning issues in 2024 on the transboundary level. So we really try to do our best to have this stakeholder involvement. And this also takes me to public participation and transparency. We do have an expert group that deals with public participation and also communication. It is very important, also aligned to the EU Water Framework Directive as to all European directives, that the involvement of the wider public has to be encouraged, and that we also want to get the opinion and input on our management plans from the wider public, and that takes an extremely important role to be transparent. So we do consult our management plans, and we have quite a broad toolbox within the ICPDR to undertake public participation. We have 24 official observers within the ICPDR participating in our plenary meetings, but also in expert group meetings. We have a lot of outreach activities to raise awareness. Social media has become really important over the last years, also for the ICPDR, and we get really good input inputs and feedback. And of course, we have branding campaigns like the Danube Day that takes place every year. This is still the poster of 2022, but I can tell you that the color for 2023 will be blue, and the motto will be "Keep the Danube Blue." So I really like that motto, that the public participation group came along, and Danube Day will be again celebrated on 29th of June. We have a Danube Art Master where young artists are invited every year to submit pieces of art, and prizes are awarded in the frame of our ordinary meeting in December. We do have a Danube box that is actually an education tool kit for schools in order to make children and teenagers aware of the importance of good status of water from the beginning, and we hope that this will be taken into later stages of their life and connecting with the Danube in a very positive way. And this is actually the end of my presentation, and I'm now happy to answer questions or to receive opinions or inputs from your side, but I would like to thank you in any case for your kind attention.